Good morning, Encounter Church. We are so glad to see you here this morning. We are fresh off of Easter. I'm thankful that He is risen, He's alive. We are about to sing some worship unto our God. We would love if you would stand with us. A lamp unto my feet. Your way is the only way for me. It's a narrow road that leads to life, but I want to be on it. It's a narrow road, but the mercy's wide, 'cause you're good on your promise. I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I'll believe it. I've seen how good it works. If you started, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. You spoke, and the chaos fell in line. Well, I know, 'cause I've seen it all my life. It's a narrow road that leads to life, but I want to be on it. Come on. It's a narrow road, and the tide is high, but you're parting the waters. I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I'll believe it. I've seen how good it works. If you started, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I'll believe it. I've seen how good it works. Started, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. You're good on your promise. You're good on your promise. You're good on your promise. You said your love will never give up. You say your grace is always enough. You said your heart will never forget or forsake me. You said I'm saved. You call me yours. You said my future's full of your hope. You've never failed, so I know that you'll never fail me. Help me sing this part. You said your love will never give up. You said your grace is always enough. You said your heart will never forget or forsake me. You said I'm saved. You call me yours. You said my future's full of your hope. You've never failed, so I know that you'll never fail me. Word. If you said it, I'll believe it. I've seen how good it works. If you started, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I'll believe it. I've seen how good it works. If you started, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. You're good on your promise. You're good on your promise. Take you at your word. light to the darkness. You give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light into darkness, you give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. I am weary from the waves crashing over every day. God of mercy, please come rescue me. I am longing for broken, make it whole again. 'Cause your power and your presence can break strongholds. King of heaven, when you speak, mountains move, and I believe there will be breakthrough. There will be breakthrough. Shake the mountains, break the walls apart, open the heavens. Almighty God, you are overcomer, defender of my heart. And by your power, the oceans open wide. Your fire falls down, heaven and earth collide. King Jesus, forever by my side. So shake the mountains and break the walls apart. Open the heavens. Almighty God, you are overcomer, defender of my heart. Oh yeah. And by your power, the oceans open wide. Your fire falls down, heaven and earth collide. King Jesus, forever by my side. Oh yeah. 'Cause your power and your presence, it breaks strongholds. King of heaven, when you speak, mountains move, and I believe there will be breakthrough. Your power and your presence, it breaks strongholds. King of heaven, when you speak, mountains move, and I believe there will be breakthrough. There will be
You are here today. That we're not in a place of hype. Okay, I just want to make that really clear. I was over there, I felt like, man, Jerome was going, was that like a Latin beat or something, dude? I was feeling that, and I was like, all right now. And I was just over here in the corner. It's man, this is so good. But it's just I was sitting there thinking, I'm so glad this is not an environment of hype. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those where you come in and it's all right, we're going to get you pumped up today. And it's you're going to move mountains. Your future's so bright, you're going to have to wear shades, And it's just no, you have no clue about my future. But this is not an atmosphere of hype. This is an atmosphere of hope. And there's a difference. I don't know if you know that. There's a huge difference. Hype is about manufacturing energy from within. Hope is about the energy coming down from above. All right? And the song that we just sang is that declaration of what that kind of hope looks like practically lived out in life. It looks around and it believes, you know what? It may look like a breakdown, but I believe I serve a God who can bring breakthrough. Right? I mean, if you've ever heard a story of breakthrough, until they got to the but part, it was a story of breakdown. And you may feel like today you're in a story of breakdown, or you may be staring at something that you feel like is way too big for you. And I just want to tell you that, man, there's a but there. There's a hope there. There's a God who can bring breakthrough there. And the story of breakdown doesn't always have to be a story of breakdown. It's a story in progress. And maybe it's with your kids. Maybe it's you've got some small kids and you're like, I'm just tired. And with a tired that one sleep won't fix, like I need to be put into a coma and come out a week later. Maybe I'd feel a little bit better. Right? Maybe it's with your job. Maybe it's with your finances or relationships. But we just want you to know you've walked into an atmosphere, even if you're not on board with it and you think maybe this is like a little bit of a hype thing, you're surrounded by people who have enough hope for you. And because we believe and we've seen God do breakthroughs and God do miracles. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about all month, is about what does it look like to experience breakthrough, to navigate and to endure what feels like a breakdown. And so you've picked a good month to be a part of this church and to come. And so with that said, I invite you to have a seat and we'll kick off our brand new series. So this month, we're going to be, nice and dark. So this month, we're going to be kicking off a new series called Navigating a Turnaround. This is like bedtime story, all right? And I want to take you on the journey this morning by going to the place where I think the conversation should start. It's June 30th, 2017, 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Is Interstate 405 and a Cessna 310 is coming in for a landing at John Wayne Airport. Problem is that the pilot is now saying Mayday because the right engine is going out. And with the right engine going out, there's no longer enough thrust to give it enough lift. And so it's beginning to drop drastically. And it's just within a couple hundred feet of the runway. But because of the right engine's failure, what he ends up hitting and clipping is the concrete divider of the interstate. Ends up crashing right in the middle of 405. Which is a 6-lane highway, if you've ever been to LA. Massive. And sprawls out, bursts into flames. Fortunately, no one dies. But as you can imagine, this becomes incredibly disruptive, like severely disruptive, and causes traffic backups that would just make you want to like give up on life. Okay? It's horrible. For miles and miles, the traffic is backed up. It causes, because of just the severity of it, and you've got gasoline, you got like specifically this like gas, and it's spilling and flames, and this massive response that has to happen. And so for about 7 to 8 hours, traffic is disrupted on the interstate in LA. And what's fascinating, though, is that this was actually studied and written up about in a traffic journal. And it was specifically wanting to highlight, and this is a picture that I had to pull off of a copyrighted site, so that's why it's watermarked, because you won't believe it unless you see it. The miles and miles and miles back up, the 7 hours of disruption of traffic wasn't on this side of the road. It was on this side of the road. It was rubbernecking that caused the problem. In fact, because of LA's traffic system and the sensors that are regularly dispersed through, along with the cameras, what the researchers were able to find was that this side was moving faster than this side of the traffic. So the other 6 lanes that had no impediments at all was moving slower than the 6 lanes that literally had an airplane crashed in the middle of it. All because of rubbernecking. I don't know about you, but like that drives me insane. When you're sitting and you're like, why am I just sitting? And then you get close enough and then you see the ambulance or a fire truck or police and you're like, I'm sitting because everybody's nosy. Of course, and then you get there and you slow down and you're like, oh my goodness, did you see that? Take a picture. Because, it's like, so you fall into the trap yourself. But I think as horrible as rubbernecking can be when others do it and not me, I think there is sometimes in the Bible stories that God has placed inside that is meant for us to rubberneck at. Stories that are meant for us to dwell, to kind of like just open our mouths in awe and be like, what were they thinking? This is a dumpster fire and a train wreck put together. And the story that I want us to walk through today is well over 3,000 years old. And parts of it are going to feel so vastly culturally different than where we are today, and it's going to feel so vastly different than what you would even think about. But this is a story that I want to walk you through its entirety because my hope is by the end of it, you're going to have fully rubbernecked this story and be like, oh my goodness, can you believe, right? It's so dramatic. But in the midst of the drama, there's something for you and for me. It begins in Judges chapter 16. And it involves a man named Samson. Now, if you've ever heard of Samson, maybe you grew up going to church and Samson was a story that was shared, or maybe you've read it before. I want to make sure for those who've never heard of Samson or don't have a deep kind of background history around Samson, that you know a little bit about him. That'll help you understand the rest of the story we're about to get into. So Samson was born to some parents who were struggling with infertility. And he was a miracle child. And not only was he a miracle child, his parents were told, this is the future leader of Israel. He is going to lead us into victory over the Philistines. The Philistines were a neighboring group of tribes or a nation state, however you want to describe them. This is kind of during the pre-Bronze Age period. The Philistines are the ones who are the first in the world to master being able to shape metal. So that meant they had an advantage with weapons. And so the Philistines had been oppressing the Israelite nation for decades. And God kind of delivers to the family the good news that you're going to have a son named Samson who's going to set you free. But here's the deal. He's going to be set apart for me in order to do this. And at the time, there was a kind of a religious practice that would sort of be akin to like a monastery monk lifestyle, but it's far more deeper, richer than just what you think around a commune or like with monks or... So what happens is the Nazirite vow is what it was called. And to be a Nazirite meant that you never drank wine, never had any kind of fermented drink. It meant that you never cut your hair, okay? So you would let your hair grow out your entire life. You would never touch anything unclean, ceremonially unclean, which meant that practically your life had a lot of rigid structures. And because of that, you looked not just physically different, but your actions looked different. So you stood out. And Samson was a Nazirite. He stood out. And so this is why Samson, when he gets a little older, everyone notices him. He's beginning to take charge. He begins to defeat the Philistines and kind of skirmishes he's had with them. But over that same time period, he also demonstrates a pattern with women that is completely destructive. And so we fast forward to Judges chapter 16, where this kind of is on display in the longest section of his story. In Judges 16, we find sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. And so this is the story of Samson and Delilah. It's a pretty famous story from the Old Testament. It's a story that most people have probably at least heard the names before. But the thing I want to point out to you is this valley of Sorek, even before we start, because this just helps to frame Samson. The Sorek is a Hebrew word that meant vine, vineyard. So here's a guy who's not supposed to be drinking wine, and he's going to Napa Valley to find his love. I mean, it is like quintessential looking for love in all the wrong places, okay? So he goes to Napa Valley, and he meets Delilah, and he falls in love. Oh, right? I mean, completely falls for her. Now, the ruler of the Philistines, the Philistine nation state, was a group of 5 different cities, and these cities had rulers, and these rulers collectively were the ruling body of the nation of Philistine, okay? And so the rulers, these 5, go to Delilah and say, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength. Because, oh, by the way, she's a Philistine, okay? So she's being offered patriotism or love. And see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So they say, hey, look, help us figure this thing out. We can't beat him. Now, chances are, especially if you grew up going to what's called children's church or ever part of children's service, you were shown a picture of Samson, and it kind of looked like that. All right? Probably not as attractive. But hey, this is Samson, right? This is this is what you colored. This is what you cut out. This is what moved between the 2 pillars on your little craft. But if this was in fact true, that this is what Samson looked like, there would have been no secret to discover. I mean, if you walk in and this guy is flinging tires, bench pressing 500 pounds in the gym, pulling a fire truck with a rope attached to it, you're not thinking, I wonder what the secret of his success is. You're not thinking, I wonder how he's able to do that. You're like, no, his biceps are bigger than my thighs. That's how he's doing that. Now, I think Samson probably looked more like this. Because this is the secret. They're like, if you walked into a room and this guy was bench pressing 500 pounds, if this guy was pulling a fire truck with a rope attached to it, you would be like, how's he doing that? That's suspicious. That's interesting. That's Samson. He did not look like a man who could do the things that he did. This is why the Philistines were so motivated, because they were a very superstitious people. They were polytheistic, and they very much believed in what we would commonly call today in magic. And they were convinced Samson had some kind of magical secret that enabled him to do what he did. So this is why they go, and they offer her 1,100 shekels of silver. Now, I know for the silver shekel people in the room, you instantly caught the value of that. You're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. That was equivalent, that would be about $55,819 today, just in the silver alone value worth. Okay, what they were offering was far more than this number in her day. But this is just to give you a sense of today. If you had all the silver that she was offered, this is how much you could cash it in based on the spot price of silver as of Friday. Right? So she's offered significant sums of money. So it's not just patriotism, it's payout. And so she chooses love. Story's over. Nope. In fact, so Delilah says to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Please, Sammy Whammy. Right? And so Samson answers her, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. So Samson, if you read the story of Samson in its entirety, you'll notice that Samson really liked riddles. Samson liked being difficult. Samson liked being annoying. Okay? as someone who likes to be annoying, my daughter recently said to my wife last night, "You're the least annoying person in this family." And I looked at my wife and was like, she's not wrong. I derive a distinct pleasure out of being annoying and mimicking her and be like, ugh. Or threatening to roll down the window when she gets out of the car at events and be like, "You grow, girl." I do this, and I find this funny. And my son is very much cut in the same cloth as I am, and as a 4-year-old, loves to figure out ways how to annoy his sister. Like, no joke. We are dangerous together because we think it's hilarious to be annoying. And Samson is a little bit like that. He likes to be annoying. And he doesn't know why she's asking, but he knows that there's this idea that he's got strength because he's magical. So he alludes to that. 7 was a very magical number in the culture in the day. And so was the idea of fresh bowstrings, like animal sinews that had not been dried. So this would have been very much oh, that sounds very magical. That sounds like something that would actually work. And so the ruler of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied them with them. And when men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." First of all, when I read the Bible, I'm like, how big was that room? I have never walked in a room in my house and be like, you know what, I could have a couple guys hiding in this room that could totally take me out right now. I never had that thought. I got a closet with a small teenage girl could fit inside of. That's my biggest threat, is because that's about as much as you can hide in my house. But this is an indication of Delilah and Samson are pretty affluent in this kind of moment. And so she says, "The Philistines are upon you." And so he snaps the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. I love that the writer makes the point, it's not he's not like, bah. He's like, bing. It's instant. Clearly this has no hold on him. And so the secret of his strength was not discovered. So Samson, realizing this seems suspicious, starts to ask questions of Delilah. No. He says, then Delilah says to Samson, "You've made a fool of me." To which Samson should have responded, "Who did I make you a fool in front of? I just saved your life." But no, he doesn't. "You lied to me," she says. "Come now, tell me how you can be tied." And he says, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes," again, this idea of new was magical, "that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied them with them. And then with men hidden in the room, again, this is now a pattern. Call an exterminator and let them know you got Philistines like roaches in your room, right? So she calls Samson, "The Philistines are upon you," but he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Bing! And he beats him again. At this point, Samson realizes, hold up, 1 maybe is a coincidence, 2 is definitely a pattern. This woman is Trouble. She is trouble. So he leaves her and goes and moves away. No. Delilah then says to Samson, "All this time you've been making a fool of me and lying of me. Tell me how you can be tied." And he replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." Now he's introducing a mechanical, physical object into this thing, but he's talking about his hair for the first time, which is an interesting fact. In a second, you'll see. He's basically saying, look, I've been toying with you, but if you literally ratchet me to the ground, which is what he's saying, physically the loom would have been anchored to the ground. If you anchor me to the ground, then I'll be as weak as any other man. So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head and wove them into the fabric and tightened them with the pin. And this is one of those funny objects, one of those funny things about this. Dude sleeps like a toddler, right? Clearly, he's got 7 braids. He's being literally woven into a loom. And on the surface, you're like, this is crazy. How does he sleep through it? But I've got a 4-year-old, and my wife and I talk frequently about how freaked out we would be if what he experiences semi-regularly ever happened to one of us. Dude will go to sleep in one set of clothing and wake up in a different one. He will go to sleep in a bed and wake up on the floor. He will go to sleep. Sometimes all his sheets and blankets have been changed. And I was like, Jenny, if I ever woke up the next morning and I was wearing a whole set of different clothes, or I had a whole set of different sheets and I had no memory of how that happened, I would not be okay with that. I wouldn't peacefully wake up and come down the steps and be like, good morning. I'd be like, look, I'm not saying I believe in aliens, but I was either abducted last night, I was drugged, and I need to go to the hospital right now because I have no recollection of how I ended up in these clothes. And I don't even know where my other clothes are. Right? I mean, like, think about that. Like, that's the toddler life. They just wake up in new clothes, and it's like they're not even bothered by it. And I'm like, bro, you should call the cops. That's your first response if that ever happens to you. Right? And so, but clearly he sleeps like a toddler. He has no clue that his hair is being woven into a fabric loom. And then she says, how can you say, I love you, you won't confide in me? Because that was weird. Because this time, the Philistines come in again, and he, boop, does the same thing. And so this has been 3 times this has happened. And she comes to him, and she's like, how can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? Like, this is the 3rd time you've made a fool of me, and you haven't told me the secret of your great strength. And with such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Here's a guy who could not be broken by any kind of physical measure, but she eventually is just going to wear him down. She nags him day and night. You don't love me. If you love me, you would tell me how I could tie you up so these men who keep appearing in our room could attack you. But no alarm bells, no red flags for him. He just gets annoyed by it. And eventually, he tells her everything. And he says, no razor has ever been used on my head because I've been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. Here he is. He's finally letting her know the secret to his strength. And if my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. And when he finally tells it, it's pretty obvious to Delilah that he's just told her everything. She's like, I broke him. A man who could not be broken by 1,000 Philistines, because at one point he single-handedly defeats 1,000 Philistines in battle. A guy who could not be broken by 1,000 Philistines is broken by Delilah. And so she sends words to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more, he has told me everything. And she is so confident in how this is communicated that the rulers return with the silver in their hands. They know this is a done deal just waiting to happen. So they show up with the money. They show up, and after putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his head, and so began to subdue him. And his strength left him. And then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He woke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before, and I'll shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left them. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, took him down to Gaza, bind him with bronze shackles, and set him to grinding grain in their prison. This is a story where we're meant to stare in disbelief. This is a story like a horror movie where you're screaming at the television, Samson, they're right behind you. So I want to introduce you to Juan. Juan Garcia was a Spaniard who happened to be a chicken farmer. And in the middle of the Spanish Civil War, he became completely disheartened with the main ideologies, which was communism and fascism that was present in the Spanish kind of Civil War. He becomes completely disheartened with it. And after the Spanish Civil War, chronologically what begins to happen is World War II. And as he's watching Nazi Germany rise in power, he sees in Nazi Germany all the things he hated about what he saw in the Spanish Civil War, ideologically. But he realized that what was uniquely different was Nazi Germany posed an even deeper threat because they were beginning to exterminate people. And so he approaches, in Madrid, the British embassy and says, I want to serve in this war with you. I want to make a difference. I want to be a part of defeating Nazi Germany. I'll be a spy for you. And he and his wife try multiple times, and they reject him. And so Juan has an idea. I know what I'll do. I'll go and sign up with the Germans. So he goes to the German embassy. He meets, through contacts, the German spy recruiter for Spain, who sees in Juan potential, so he trains him in espionage and gives him a cover. Juan is now a businessman who has connections in London. And so Juan, through some craftiness of his own, is able to arrange some documentation that kind of reinforces this. And so Juan gets to work. The Germans send him to London, but he goes to Lisbon. And in Lisbon, he collects train schedules from London. He collects tourist guides about London, and he reads regularly the newspaper coming out of London. And using those objects, he begins to craft false spy testimonials and reports to send to Germany. And the Germans believe it. When there's an attack or something that happens in the news that is published in the newspaper, he blames the delay of the report that he's just copied out of the newspaper on bad postal service because of the war. And the Germans believe it. He begins to get more effective in recruiting information, all while staying in Lisbon, by the way. And eventually develops, communicates to the Germans that he has a spy network of 27 spies stationed in London. Now, the British are monitoring German communications, and they break the code on Juan's transmissions. And they realize that there is a spy ring of 27 spies all embedded throughout London, supplying the Germans with information. And it's all being led by this man. So the British government, in a pretty bold state of confidence for them, approaches him with the idea of recognizing, hey, we know you're leading a spy ring. And he's like, great, I'm glad you discovered it. Can I work for you now? I did all of this so that I could become a double agent for you. Oh, and by the way, those 27 spies, none of them are real. I've made them all up. He had put together a 27 spy ring in London that did not exist. And he was so good that one time, a report that should have been filed because it was clearly information, if he had that much of a network, he should have known it. He doesn't know it clearly because he's not a British spy at that point. And so the Germans get suspicious that one of his spies, maybe Juan's not who he says he is. And Juan writes back and says, oh, I apologize for the absence of that information. That was information that my agent in Liverpool had, but he got sick and died. And you're writing me about how I failed when one of your own has fallen. He makes the German government feel so bad that they begin to give his fake wife a pension. Right? At this point, the German government is spending about $1 million a year fueling Juan's spy network in London. These spies are regularly sending letters to the German connections there, 2,000 words apiece. The Germans are so overwhelmed by so much information coming from this spy network of 27 spies that they're like, we don't need any more spies in London. So they stop recruiting spies for London because of Juan. They ask Juan, are our bombs landing? And he says they're landing perfectly, because they were aiming for central London. If you've ever studied the bombings of London, one of the questions that will emerge as you look at the spread is how bad were the Germans? They didn't hit central London. They were hitting Kent and the surrounding southern portion of London. But the reason that they were so bad was because Juan was like, man, that bomb, you nailed it. It was great. They got so dependent on him that he was telling them they were hitting all their targets when in fact they were horrible at it. And so they kept bombing Kent and the surrounding southern portion of London, thinking they were hitting central London because Juan kept telling them they were. Juan was so good that Hitler awarded him the Iron Cross. He got a Nobel medal from Adolf Hitler. And then right after that, got another medal from the King of England called an MBE. He's one of the few people in human history in World War II to get a commandeering medal, one of the highest medals you can get from both the Allies and the Axis. An incredible story. And this guy won, eventually after World War II, fakes his own death, and then moves to Venezuela, and for 40 years runs a bookshop, and no one knows about it. No one even knows who he is. It's only because of a journalist who discovers his name and some of the details and starts to track him down by literally calling every Juan Garcia in Spain. That's how his story comes out. Because he eventually connects with a relative of Juan, who connects him to Juan in 1984. So it's this incredible story. But I would argue that the same reason the story of Juan Garcia can even happen, the only reason a story like that can actually be a true story is because of human beings and a unique capacity that we have. A capacity that was figuratively and quite literally embedded in the story of Samson. Our ability to be blind, to be so good at self-deception that we don't even see the reality right in front of our eyes. If you were to have read the story of Judges in the original language, you would have noticed that the writer had a tendency to use the word for seeing. It was an obsession in the story. It was an indicator of the story that there is a theme. While you're rubbernecking at Samson's life, I want you to see something about Samson that's really, really important. Samson started out being able to see, but eventually became blind to his reality. And that figurative, metaphorical blindness to his reality eventually gave way to a literal blindness when his enemies took his eyesight. Because Samson, as a human being, and the Germans, as human beings, and as you and I, as human beings, we possess an incredible ability to deceive ourselves. To deceive ourselves in such a blatant, obvious way that we don't see it, and yet everyone else around us does. Think about it. Samson was in a place he shouldn't be, with a person he shouldn't be, doing things he shouldn't be doing. There were so many red flags. There were so many blinking red lights in his life, and he was completely blind to them. And the story of Samson is a little bit of a trap. You're meant to lean in to the story of Samson, and you're meant to scream at the pages, "Samson, what are you doing? Samson, this is a horror story. This is a train wreck. Bro, this is the third time. People are hiding in your room again." Like, it's laughable how blind he is. And the point of the story is to get you so sucked in to Samson's blindness that eventually God's Spirit says, "Hey, what about you?" Because none of us ever started out our adult life thinking, "Man, I want to financially ruin myself through debt. I want to one-click my way into financial slavery." We never think that. We never think, "Hey, when I grow up, I'm going to have $45,000 in credit card debt." No. None of us ever dreamed standing at the altar about creating a marriage where we continually grow distant with each passing year, where we lose sight of who we used to love. None of us ever dreamed about getting involved with a married man or a woman and completely wrecking, not only our own marriage, but another one. None of us ever dreamed about becoming addicted, or losing the respect of our children because of choices we make, or end up falling in love with someone with destructive habits or bad character. And yet, we do. Because we are just as good at being blind as Samson was. We never intended to do it, and yet, maybe it's not as dramatic as this, but all of us have had the experience of waking up one morning and being completely in a hole and asking the question, who dug this hole? All along, there's a shovel in the corner. Because you and I are some of the best people at destroying our own lives. There are some storms in life that happen that you didn't know were coming. There are some storms that happen in life that you did not plan on. But I would argue sometimes we find ourselves in storms. Sometimes we find ourselves in stories of breakdown, and the reason we're in the story is because we put ourselves in it. That story of Samson and that reality should terrify you because it terrifies me. And that was the trick of Samson's story, was for you to read his story and then realize, oh my goodness, that same tendency is in my story too. And I think that's the critical point. If you're going to be a person, like hopefully this series helps you do, to navigate a turnaround, to be able to turn from where you're headed and to turn away from it into something else. Right? The first step in navigating a turnaround is to do the very opposite of what Samson did. Samson is a picture of what's called an anti-hero. He is a what not to do story in the Bible. He's an anti-example. And the way you learn from an anti-example is you do the opposite of what they do. So instead of self-deception, it's radical honesty. Honesty is the first step in navigating a turnaround. Honesty with ourselves is one of the first steps in experiencing and moving towards breakthrough. If you're not honest about your books and your business will one day fail. If you're not honest about where your marriage is headed, one day your marriage will end up the very place it's been going all along. Honesty is the first step in pulling the car off the side of the road and say, wait a second, I want to go to Florida, but I'm driving to Maine. I need to turn around, or I'm going to end up in a place I did not want to go. And I think one of the ways that we can get radical honesty, I think that's the reason, one of the secrets of the 12-step program, is that honesty, brutal honesty, is a critical part of it. Because you can't become free from an addiction unless you see it. You can't take off chains unless you realize you have them. And you can't be found until you realize you're lost. And so this brutal honesty, one of the ways that you can foster it in your life is questions. Like, is there a place? Is there a place where I'm going? A certain website? Casino? Bar? That person's house? Hanging out after school? Because that place is usually attached to a person. Is there a relationship? Is there a group of relationships? Look, there's a reason, if you look at the book of Proverbs, which was written as a parenting manual, that the very first lesson in the book of Proverbs is about the friends you choose. I mean, Solomon, wanting to teach his children well, realizes like, hey, your first lesson out the gate, besides fear the Lord, which is fundamental, foundational to everything I'm going to teach you, the very first step after that is realizing that your friends are a destination. They're not just on the journey with you. That when you choose a friend, when you choose a group of friends, you're choosing a future. Like, that's the very first lesson of Proverbs. Because Solomon recognizes, the wisest man who ever lived, that relationships have such a powerful force on our lives. And the question is there a place, is there a relationship? Is there a coworker? Is there something going on with your kids or in your own marriage where you're not seeing reality and you're not being honest with yourself? Or is there something you're doing that you're living with a disconnect? Because this whole idea of this blindness that he had, this willful blindness, was rooted in the belief that Samson had that what he did today did not have an impact on his tomorrow. And the point is, for us who've caught in that trap, we were meant to ask ourselves, is there a place, is there a relationship, is there something that we're doing that is a future regret in waiting? Look, every regret that you and I have in our own lives started out with a decision that felt really small. And Samson and the trap of Samson was meant for us to catch it at seed form before it became a sequoia that we couldn't cut down, that loomed large in our life as a regret. And these are really good questions to ask ourselves, but hey, sometimes how do you know you're fooling yourself? You don't. And that's why we need other people, because that's the other trap that you and I see in Samson's story what he never saw in his own story. Sometimes it takes someone else outside of our story to see the disaster in our own, which is why you need community, which is why you need people. It's why we have men's group and women's group. It's why we started Activate. It's why we're going to have in the fall a whole new structure around groups that we're really excited about, where you're going to get to know each other even deeper in this church, because we're growing and we want you to be connected and know people in this church, not just attend and hear me or hear them. And so having someone sit across from you who's willing to be honest with you, who loves you enough that they're willing for you to be mad at them, who's willing to ask the question, do you see an area of my life that I will one day regret? And they actually answer you. Because if you want to know, does someone really love you, ask them this question. Embrace yourself for what they might say. You may not like what they say to you, but it may be the very thing that saves you. Saves you financially, saves you relationally, saves you professionally. This is a powerful question that, quite honestly, many of us would be afraid to ask. But I'm telling you, if you're committed to honesty, if you're committed to making sure I don't end up in a place I don't want to go, you need to be asking this question. And you need to have someone asking you this question in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean they pull it out and ask it verbatim, but they care enough to peer into your life and ask you tough things. Not in a way that feels condemning, but in a way that feels like, hey, you're not alone. I'm with you. Do you see an area of my life that I will one day regret? Powerful question. That ultimately, had Samson been asked that, and he'd been honest, it could have changed Samson's whole story. And he wouldn't ended up in prison blinded. But I recognize, even as we close, that for some of us, you're like, these are great questions that would have been helpful 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, before those regrets were planted into my life. And I just want to leave you with one last piece of the story. It's the part at the very end. As he's grinding grain in the prison, the hair on his head begins to grow again. And it's God putting at the very end of this dumpster fire a piece of hope. That Samson, while doing all of that, the hair growing on his head is an indicator of the awareness starting to grow in his life. And you see that show up in what happens next. So don't just take my word for it. Look what he does after this moment and what he says to God in it. And you see this guy became self-aware. And he clearly started his relationship with God back. And his final act against the Philistines is his greatest. It's his last, but it's his greatest. And I think it's because hope began to come back into his life, and Samson had the realization that maybe God was not done with him. That in spite of all the things he had done, that maybe God wasn't finished writing his story. And I would say to you, as we go into this series over the next few weeks, that my encouragement to be for you, if you're kind of saddled with the guilt and the regret and the shame and all the weight of all those things, that I would just say to you that, man, maybe your story's not over. Maybe this breakdown can still become a breakthrough. But there's some things that God needs to do in you and through you for that to happen. And I want to invite you back next week and the week after that, and then at the end of this month, a powerful message from two friends of mine that I think can help navigate you. And for some of you, maybe the very first step for you today would be like what some did last week, which is to begin a relationship with Jesus. to jettison the idea of religion and realize that God is inviting you into a personal relationship with him, and that the very first step of that is brutal honesty with him about the ways that you damage that relationship. Because brutal honesty is the key to any great relationship. Not brutal in harshness, not brutal in the way we attack, but the fact that we're willing to bare our soul so that we don't end up in a place we never intended to go. And that if you and I are willing to be honest with God and with ourselves and with others, that can be the first step in navigating a turnaround. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for the privilege, first of all, of us just being here today. Thank you for the story of Samson, for the loving way that you trap us in it so that you can help us find freedom through it. I pray that even right now inside of our souls, that maybe those questions, you would just, Holy Spirit, begin to illuminate areas of our own lives where, whether it's a place, maybe it's a relationship or a group of friends, or maybe it's something that we're doing or saying that's beginning to lead us down a road that we don't want to travel on, that ends with regret. So thank you for your mercy and your compassion that you desire for us not to end up there, that you really do want to see better decisions and fewer regrets in our lives. So thank you that you catch us and trap us so that you can release us towards freedom, not so that we would be bound by guilt and shame or condemnation. And thank you that you're a God who meets us, even if this is not our first time being there, but we're there again and again and again. Thank you for your love that never fails and never gives up. And thank you for the reality that you're inviting us all into a deeper relationship with you. And it's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. So we're going to wrap up today with a song that is just meant to give you some space to ask those questions, to be honest with yourself, to be honest with God. Maybe it's with your business. Maybe it's something personal. Maybe it's something relational. I don't know. But the song is an invitation to invite you to ask those kind of questions. To say, God, like the psalmist wrote, search me, know me, test me. See if there's something destructive in my life and lead me in the way everlasting. And the song is called Here Again because it's about finding ourselves in a place that we never wanted to end up again, but also about finding a God who meets us here again. So I invite you to stand if you're able as our team leads us with this song.
Can't control what tomorrow will bring, but I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. Not enough that you come, will you meet me here again? It's all I want, it's all you are. Will you meet me here again? As I walk down through the valley, let your love rise above everything. Like the sun shaping the shadows, in my weakness your glory appears.
all you are, will you meet me here again? I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? Oh, 'cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again?
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you found the last hour hopeful and helpful. One of the things that we value the most at Encounter Church would be our volunteers. And I want to introduce you to a couple of them. This is Janelle and Claire, and they work with our toddlers, the little ones. And not only are they amazing, and if you have toddlers, you know how amazing they are, but these two in particular, they were toddler teachers when my son was a toddler. He is now a 10-year-old fifth grader. They've been serving and serving and giving and starting that foundation of a relationship with Jesus. And we're just so thankful for them and for what they do. If you are interested in taking that next step, maybe that question that Chris posed, which is so powerful, maybe it's something I don't want to regret is not giving back to God in the form of service. If you're like, my next step is to step in and serve at Encounter Church, we have a place for you. And you can scan or attempt to scan this QR code up here. I had a battle with one of our other people that said, you can't scan it because you have an iPhone. I'm like, don't even, right? Like, no. Your Android makes text green, which is not good, right? So, but anyway, if you scan that, then we will reach out to you. We'll find a place for you, whether it is with toddlers, elementary students, middle school and high school students, with our production team, our welcoming team in the cafe. We turn this place right after church every Sunday back into a preschool, which it is during the week. And then on Saturday mornings, we transform it back into what you see today. And listen, TD Garden workers don't have anything on us, right? Like, we get it done. If you're interested in joining one of those teams, we would love you to help you take that next step in your walk. As Chris mentioned during the message, we have women's and men's group that alternate every other week. This week is the women's group. So yes, that is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. here at the church, and the men's group will be the following Monday. We hope you have an awesome week and look forward to seeing you back here next week as we continue our series. God bless and take care.